This season, snipers received some big changes in the form of a handling buff and the ability to build into flinch resistance. Due to these changes, several different snipers have become much better and much more viable than before. I am Awake and this is my Season 17 sniper tier list. So before we hop right in, I just want to say that this list is my opinion. A lot of sniper preference or ranking will come from personal feel for the gun, so if you disagree with some of the placements, feel free to let me know down in the comments what you would change. That being said, I have sniped for a very long time, and I do even snipe in tournaments and in scrims and things like that, so I at least have a pretty good feel for where I think most of these snipers should fall on the list. So we're going to go in alphabetical order, which actually starts us off with the very popular Adored. I believe the Adored can just be bought from the kiosk in the tower at any point if you have the required materials, so I'm going to go ahead and say right off the bat that I think this one is S tier. It's very popular for a reason. I always recommend this gun to newer players who are looking to snipe, as it's very easy to get, like I said, just from the kiosk in the tower, and it has a set roll, so you don't have to farm it at all, you're not able to. But the set roll is actually a really good roll with snapshot and killing wind. Snapshot is still S tier even after the changes, so you definitely want to be running that. And killing wind is actually very good as well. It gives you a range buff and a mobility buff, so just really nice to have on a sniper. Next we have the 140 RPM Apostate, which can be farmed from the public event on the moon. The Apostate actually isn't too bad anymore since the handling changes, so I would recommend using this only if you had like an absolute god roll, which would probably be surplus and opening shot, and then maybe some handling in the barrels or masterwork if you're able to. I'm gonna go ahead and put the Apostate as a B tier. Next up we have the notorious Beloved or Beloved. This was originally from the Menagerie back in the day, but it's now available from the new season in the Leviathan. You can get it from chess with the opulent keys or by focusing engrams in the helm. This is also the first sniper on our list here that can be crafted, which is a huge plus since you can get the exact roll that you want if you're able to grind it. The roll I crafted is enhanced snapshot and enhanced quick draw. I also maxed out the handling with the barrels and masterwork since that fits my playstyle the most. Other solid options would be surplus or moving target. Those are both really good as well. I think surplus is actually faster than snapshot, but only when you have all three abilities, so I opted for snapshot since it's more consistent. And I'm gonna place Beloved in S tier, and I'm actually gonna put it above Adored. I'm not gonna rank all the tiers this way, only S tier. I'm gonna actually rank them within the tier itself, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna put Beloved above Adored since I think it's a little bit better. Next we have the Bite of the Fox, which is an old Iron Banner sniper, and I believe it can only be obtained from Zur now if we're lucky enough for him to sell it. This is a 72 RPM sniper, so it's the slower firing one. It has a really unique reticle. It's like a chevron or a little triangle. And you can roll snapshot, opening shot, which is always going to be the god roll if it's possible for a gun to roll that. So very good roll perk wise. It's a really good gun overall. It just doesn't really fit my playstyle. It's a little bit slower for how I play. And if you can adjust to the reticle though, I think it's a very solid option. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in B tier. Next is the Distant Tumulus, which I think is a world drop, but to be honest, I don't even know if you can still get it or where it's exactly from, because I feel like I haven't gotten one in a while, but I do know at least at one point it was a world drop. So the roll I have wasn't very good at all, but it didn't feel horrible to use. Honestly, it was still pretty good. The scope is kind of ugly to look through, but if you had a really good roll like Snapshot Dragonfly, I could see that being pretty fun to use. There are definitely better options out there, so I'm going to put it in C tier. Next we have the Trial Sniper, the Eye of Soul. This is a kinetic 90 RPM, which is my preferred frame of sniper, and the one that I think is best overall. The Eye of Soul can also be adept, which is a huge plus as you get access to adept mods. So here's where the list may be a bit controversial to some people, but I'm going to put the Eye of Soul in S tier above Beloved. I actually think it's a bit better than Beloved, and I'm going to say that this is going to be the overall number one. I do think the Eye of Soul is the best sniper in the game, and my reasoning for this is because you can get surplus and snapshot on the same gun. Beloved cannot get both of those at the same time, so Eye of Soul has that over it. Also, you can roll Ensemble Snapshot. Ensemble is actually really good. It's kind of slept on. You get that extra handling when you're next to your teammates. I really like Ensemble. That's the main one I used until I had a surplus roll drop for me. And I believe in handling pretty much above all else for snipers, so that's why I'm going to put Eye of Soul over Beloved. Next we have the Far Future, which is one of the seasonal weapons from, I believe, Season of the Chosen. This gun's very interesting, especially with the recent changes. I think it might have been one of the biggest beneficiaries to the recent change because it can't roll snapshot, but that's not as big of a deal anymore, and you can run surplus or moving target, and then you can run opening shot in the other slot. So both really good rolls. I would say to go for a handling masterwork or fluted barrel, something like that, anything to get more handling since you cannot get snapshot. I didn't like this gun right away after the change. I tested it for a bit, but after I got used to it, it felt pretty good to use, so I'm gonna go ahead and put it in A tier. Next we have the fast firing Father's Sins, which I think is obtained from Wellspring if I recall correctly. Is also craftable, which is a huge bonus. The sniper also has access to enhanced under pressure, which is super cool and is pretty unique. You can also get snapshot, opening shot, or even Eye of the Storm if you wanted to try something new out. The scope is also super clean, it's really nice to use. I could see this being a low A tier or a high B tier, but I'm gonna put an A tier since I really like it. Next we have the Frozen Orbit, which is super easy to farm by turning in engrams at shacks. So I actually really like this gun. It's another one that I recommend to beginners as it's really forgiving and it's pretty easy to use. It's kind of slow since it's a 72 RPM, which I don't really like personally, but if you're just playing trials or something where it's a little slower, it's not a bad option at all. I really like the surplus snapshot roll I have, so I'm going to put this in A tier. Next we have the Fugue. I'm not exactly sure how to say this. It's the new Suro sniper from the Witch Queen that is an energy 90 RPM. I actually kind of like this one. It's not quite S tier, but it does have some solid perk options along with the flinch resist, the Suros trait. So if you build all the way into flinch resist, I could see this being like S tier honestly, but I don't really play that way and it's a little bit situational, so I'm gonna go ahead and put it in A tier. Next we have the budget Uzume, the Gallu RR3. Admittedly I haven't used this one as much as some of the other ones since it is brand new, but I did get an ensemble snapshot roll that I actually really like. The scope is super nice too, really clean. I'm gonna go ahead and put this in A tier actually since it's really good, it's just not quite as good as some of the other snipers out there. Next is the Icolo sniper, and honestly I'm not a fan of this at all. I tried to make it work and I was really struggling to get even any clips for this, so the scope is super awkward and the handling feels off, the model is weird, so sorry to all the 4 Icolos mains out there, but I'm gonna put this in C tier. Next is the Long Shadow, which I think is a Vanguard sniper. I know the gunsmith can sell it occasionally as well, so personally I don't really like this gun at all. I don't know what it is, but for me something just feels off trying to use it. And like I said at the beginning, sniping has a lot to do with feel for the gun, but even outside of just like a subjective feel, I feel like there's a lot better options out there, especially as a kinetic 90 RPM. Like I said, Eye of Soul is in that slot as well, so for me this is just going to go in C tier. Next is the Hubble telescope itself, the Iron Banner Occluded Finality. So I'm going to start off by saying that I am not a fan of this gun at all, to the point that I didn't even use it to get clips for this, but I do know that it's very good. I've used it before. It has a ton of aim assist and it can roll with snapshot, opening shot, or even Iron Reach, but with the recent change to flinch and stability, I'm not sure if Iron Reach would be the best option anymore, but I have not tested that. Overall, if you can adjust to zooming in so far that you see your enemy's soul, then honestly it's a really good sniper. It just has so much zoom, so I don't use it, but if you get used to that, it could definitely be A tier. Next is the Omniscient Eye, which is from the Garden of Salvation raid. I didn't really have access to a super good roll of this, but I have used the one I have quite a good amount. It's not terrible, the scope is kind of different, it's not the worst, but it does have a limited perk pool and it's kind of hard to farm because you have to do a raid. It's not the best gun, it's not the worst gun, so I'm going to go ahead and put it in B tier. Next we have Praedyth's Revenge, the OG sniper from the Vault of Glass raid. You can also get a time loss version that can access adept mods if you do the harder version of the raid. Now I actually never see anyone use this ever. I mean there are better options so it makes sense, but it's still a really good gun. And you can get a roll like moving target and opening shot, or you can do something like no distractions. Firefly would be kind of fun. It's still slept on overall, and with the recent snapshot nerf, definitely B tier. Shepherd's Watch is next, and again this is one of those world drop type weapons. It's a kinetic 90 RPM, which means it does compete directly with Eye of Soul. So there's really only one reason to use this, and that's if you can't get an Eye of Soul, or if you have under pressure snapshot. Under Pressure is a really good perk on snipers. It's super rare. I'm not going to go into like the details as to why Under Pressure is good on snipers. It gets kind of confusing. It has a lot to do with like cone angles and some weird numbers, but that's not really my thing, so we're not going to go into that. Just believe me, Under Pressure is really good. It's fun to use. It has a really clean scope, so I'm going to go ahead and put it in A tier. Next is the Silicon Neuroma, obtained from Nightfalls. You probably want to run Snapshot and Opening Shot if you're able to get that. This is another one that also has access to Adept mods, so you could do something like Adept Handling. Normally I would always recommend Icarus, but when they recently changed the game with airborne effectiveness, it doesn't really matter anymore. You can't hit anything in the air anyway, so if I was going to run this, I'd probably look at running Adept Handling. And so, since this is a kinetic slot, 72 RPM, it's somewhat rare, so I'm going to go ahead and put this in A tier. Speaking of kinetic 72 RPMs, we have Deepstone Crypt's Succession, and I actually really like this gun. It looks really cool. I like the scope. The reticle is a bit weird. It seems a bit bigger than the other reticles, so it's a bit off-putting at long range. It's kind of hard to see through the reticle because it covers up your target, but it's not like a deal breaker. It's not that big of a deal. I have a slideways snapshot roll that I actually really like, so I'm going to go ahead and put this in B tier. Next is the Long Walk from the Prophecy dungeon. So I'm just going to be honest, I do not like this one at all. It feels super awkward. Don't like the scope at all. It's a 72 RPM. I'm just going to put it in C tier and move on. Next up is the Supremacy from the Last Wish raid. This is a fast firing 140 RPM that mostly suffers from a very limited perk pool. It can roll Snapshot, which is good, but the other perk slot is not very good at all. There's not even really a good option that does anything. It's only like Kill Clip and Rampage and things like that. So I'm just going to put it in B tier, as it's not really a bad gun. It just doesn't really have anything that puts it over the edge, so B tier. Next is the Kinetic Stasis 90 RPM Thoughtless. So I was originally super excited for this gun because I saw that it can get Headstone, but it can't roll Headstone and Snapshot, which is a huge bummer because Headstone would be kind of cool in something like Trials or Revive game mode because the little stasis thing covers up revives, but it can't roll that and Snapshot. And the roll I have is actually really good, but something about the scope just feels off to me. The reticle seems really small compared to the other ones, and it just feels a little awkward to use, and honestly something about the scope gives me like motion sickness almost, which is kind of weird. I don't really get that, so I don't know. I tried this sniper a few times and I was like not feeling good and I just stopped. I did not like it all, so I'm going to put it in C tier. Next is the Tranquility, and I'm going to recommend Surplus Snapshot as the roll for it. This gun I believe is one of the moon guns you can get from Eris. I'm going to keep this one short and put it in B tier since it has a great perk option, but it's outclassed by far better guns. Next is the Twilight Oath, which has one of the lowest, if not the lowest zoom in the game, so it's a very short zoom scope. It's easy to farm too. You can focus engrams in the helm, or you can run Shattered Throne. It's a little harder to get from there, but both are good options. It has really good perk options too. You can get Surplus Snapshot or Opening Shot Snapshot. I believe both are possible. Overall, the zoom is super nice. You can snipe at close range since you can see really clearly. I'm going to give this an A tier. If it was a 90 RPM instead of a 140, it would be an easy S tier for me, but it's still really good, so I'm going to go ahead and say A tier. Next is the Uzume Sniper, which I believe just got removed from the Nightfall rotation, but hopefully you were able to farm one because this is definitely an S tier sniper for sure. So I'm going to place it above Adored and below Beloved here. I really like the gun. It can roll Snapshot Vorpal or even high impact reserves. They both let you one-shot Guardians and their supers, which most 90 RPMs can't do. It can also roll Firefly, which is really fun. It's not necessarily the best perk, but it's pretty cool to use. It's really fun with Snapshot Firefly. Uzume also has access to all the Adept mods. The reason that I don't really use this one and that I don't like it is because it has a gray reticle when all the other reticles are red. Just something I want to point out. It's really hard for me to see that reticle for some reason, so if you adjust to it though, it would pretty much be a non-factor, so just wanted to point that out, but still S tier. Next up is the 1000 Yard Stare. This gun was originally in Destiny 1, but they brought it over to Destiny 2 recently with the Grasp of Avarice dungeon. You can get some super good perk options with it. You can get Quick Draw Snapshot or even Perpetual Motion Snapshot. Both are very good. It's easy to farm. You just have to farm the boss from the dungeon. So overall, very good gun. Definitely gonna go in S tier because I'm a huge fan of the 90 RPM snipers. This one is a 90 RPM, has a very good scope, has very good perks, so easy S tier. Our last legendary sniper on the list is the Widow's Bite, which is a bit of a bummer because I think it is C tier. It's one of those snipers that just can't roll snapshot or surplus, so there's really not much going for it perk wise, so for me, C tier. Now for the exotics, I'm not going to include heavy weapons since those aren't really traditional snipers, so the first up is going to be Borealis. Although its main perk is not useful in PvP at all, outside of just choosing which flavors your enemies will die to, it's actually not a bad gun. I kind of enjoy using it. Don't get me wrong, there's absolutely no reason to use it. A lot of the other guns are way better, but with the recent handling buffs, I'm going to put it in A tier because I like it. Next up is the Cloudstrike, obtained from Empire Huts. Now this sniper is super unique as you get to rain down lightning from above, which is pretty cool. Each time you get a precision kill, a huge lightning strike happens. And since this looks so sick when it happens, S tier. No, actually this sniper is really good, especially with the improved handling and now that you can build into flinch resistance. No other gun in the game can really give you free kills like Cloudstrike. You can shoot one bullet and get like 4, 5, 6 kills, and that happens pretty often. It's not super rare when you get at least 3 or 4 people. It happens all the time, especially in control. So just because of that, a good Cloudstrike user can be super terrifying, so I'm going to keep this in S tier. The only major downside to it for me before the change was that you couldn't put Icarus grip on it, but now you're not able to shoot any guns in the air anyway with the new airborne ineffectiveness changes, so it's really not an issue, so S tier. Izanagi's Burden is up next, and it's going to be our final sniper here, and it's also going to be C tier. I mean, it's kind of fun to use. You can like body shot people with the perk, but honestly with the scavenger nerf, it's way too hard to get that much ammo, and it's really not worth using all your ammo just to body shot someone, so it's going to go in C tier. So that's going to do it for my tier list. Like I said, a lot of sniping sort of comes down to feel and personal preference, but I do think that the list is at least fairly objective and should give some good insight to anyone who's looking for a new sniper to use or is new to sniping as a whole. Definitely check out the guns in S tier. Those are going to be your best options, and I don't really think anyone would really argue with those for the most part. I want to say this video did take me a little bit to make, took me a while to edit, so I appreciate any support, and if you could leave a comment, let me know what you would change. I'd appreciate that, so thank you for watching and have a great rest of your day.